Coming up, an LA Times Today special, the science behind coronavirus, what doctors now know about the virus and their search for a treatment. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong joins me for an hour-long examination of the social, medical, and political impact of the outbreak. Hello and welcome to an LA Times Today special. I'm Spectrum News 1 anchor Lisa McCree. For the next hour, our focus will be on the coronavirus. Joining me now for this hour is Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, the owner of LA Times, who has spent his career understanding the biology of the immune system. Together, we'll be looking at the social, political, and medical impact of COVID-19. And Dr. Patrick, thank you for being here and taking the time out of your busy day. Why is it important for all of us to understand the science of the coronavirus?
Well, look, I think, as you could clearly feel and see, the fear that now is emanated from this pandemic, it's never happened in our lifetime. And it's so important from my perspective, not to just allay the fear, but to actually provide information that we as a community and a country can have some level of control, meaning control within yourself that we understand the science. We understand because of the SARS in 2003, the scientists of the world now begin to really understand the science of this thing so that we can provide some level of not just comfort, but ideas of you can control what you can control, and we're going to be able to beat this thing.
As we're being educated on the coronavirus, we're learning a lot of new terms like social distancing and a very important one, flattening the curve.
Well, you know what we mean by flattening the curve is the infectivity of this virus. It's 1,000 times more infective than the SARS virus. So the math now is that once one person is infected, 2.6 to 3 other people get infected as a consequence. So you have this peak. And the only way to prevent this peak is to actually do the self-isolation so this peak curve can then be flattened. Why is it important to flatten the curve? It's important to flatten the curve so you don't overwhelm the healthcare system. And that's the importance.
Governor Newsom said we're going to commandeer hotels so that if we need to isolate people and treat people and we run out of hospital beds, as they did in Italy, and they also ran out of respirators, and we have fewer hospital beds than Italy per capita. He's going to move people into hotels, but you've told me that it's the staff that's just as important as the facility.
It is both, right? What's important is to identify places where people can go without panic. But most importantly, these places where people can go will have a trained staff that are fully protected, so we don't contaminate even the staff, because my fear is the reduction of a healthcare staff that can actually manage and help these patients. So it's not magical about a physical place, but what Governor Newsom has done is commendable, in fact, what the country should have done. So California, again, as usual, will lead the nation. So what Governor Newsom has done is not just hotels, he's now interacted directly with all the CEOs of the community up and down California. The next step is to ensure that there's full training of the community of doctors, because this is a new disease, not only the doctors and nurses, of how not only to recognize it, but how to manage these patients.
There are things we know and things we don't know about the coronavirus. We know that it enters through our mouth, our eyes, our nose. It can live on surfaces, we learned last week, for up to 3 days, cardboard for up to 24 hours, at least in a lab setting, and it can be airborne. Once in our body, it attaches to cells in our airways and starts replicating itself, making millions and millions of copies of itself. How long between the time do we know that it enters and attaches to cells in our airways and that we start seeing symptoms?
I will be going through that in great detail because I think it's very important to take this step by step. First of all, this idea of what is it on surfaces and on your hands. This, happily and luckily for us, is what we call an envelope virus, meaning it has a capsule, which is a greasy, fatty capsule. And guess what? Detergent, soap, can crack that capsule and kill that virus. So when we say wash your hands with soap or detergent or laundry soap or dishwasher soap, that is really effective in killing this virus. The other thing with regard to the surfaces and how long it stays on surfaces, it depends on the environment, because heat, temperature, and also the roughness of the surface. So there's all kinds of, so on surfaces, one should take the alcohol wipes, but you need a concentration of alcohol that's sufficient. So soap, again, soap and water is as good.
And before you're symptomatic, does that depend on your own immune system?
So the question is, when do you become symptomatic, and what are the symptoms? We'll go into that as well as in detail. And it turns out dry cough and fever are the two. If you have dry cough and fever, we know that that's a high probability when we look at the data from China as the evidence of symptoms of infection.
You know, we have learned in the last few weeks more about how we should behave. The self-isolation, the hand washing.
Don't forget elbow bumping. I can't emphasize so much more that handshaking is this is a vehicle, this is a vector. So handshaking is really what's going to actually hurt in terms of flattening the curve.
But have scientists learned more about how this virus behaves once it's in our body? And can that knowledge, how it replicates, the mechanism by which it multiplies inside of us, if you can't kill the virus, can you kill the tools it needs to multiply?
You know, the fact that we have a pandemic today is by happenstance the best time that we, as a community of scientists in the world, can attack it. And the reason being twofold. When the SARS virus happened in 2003, we were able to understand how it actually attacked the cells and how it got into the human cells. There's a thing called an ACE2 receptor on your lungs. We understood that then, and we had then a lead time from 2003 to 2019 to understand how we could block it. Today, with supercomputing and genomics and sequencing, not only we can block it, we can understand now how we can actually prevent the machinery in our cells, and then finally we can understand how we can actually prevent it from shedding. We can understand how we can actually kill the factory itself.
So you think we'll have a treatment before a vaccine?
Absolutely. I think, well, you know, we should be dogmatic because I think both should go in parallel and rapidly. But the treatment itself could be the vaccine, because the treatment itself could induce your own immune system to understand and prevent further infection.
And finally, Dr. Patrick, private industry, there's lots of money to be made globally by this, but you think that there is something greater happening?
I don't think anybody, everybody that we've been interacting with at both the private and the public level considers the financial return on this in any way whatsoever. This is a pandemic that's affecting humanity, and what I'm proud to say is that everybody we've spoken to, whether it be Fortune 5 companies that are working to supply supercomputing support, such as Microsoft and even NVIDIA, we're using these supercomputers, GPU clouds for esports gaming, are completely open to allow this. The scientists themselves are publishing their work on a daily basis. So I'm pleased to say that the global community, both public and private, are really coming together to try and solve this problem.
Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, I thank you for your time this hour, this important hour that we'll be doing together, and also for the consistently important reporting that the Los Angeles Times has been doing. It's so important to the health of Southern California.
Thank you so much.
We are happy you are here with us on LA Times Today as we explore the science behind coronavirus. We'll be back right after a short break.
Let me start on what is the coronavirus. You've seen a lot of names: coronavirus, COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, SARS. And they all, in a sense, mean the exact same thing here. This virus is a RNA virus. What I mean by that, the genetic signature inside this virus, that little curly, is made of a RNA that can reproduce. But most importantly, the virus has on its surface an envelope or a capsule. and then you see the spikes. And the spikes form a crown, and that's why it's called coronavirus. In 2019, it created this disease in China, and that's what COVID-19 was the first name. Coronavirus disease in 2019, COVID-19. And now the World Health Organization has created an official name. This is the latest scientific name, SARS-CoV-2. And why SARS-CoV-2? Because this is a second-generation daughter virus of SARS. And why is that important to us? Well, it's given us a head start. It's given the scientists a head start since 2003, 2004, 2005 to fully understand this family of coronaviruses, specifically SARS and now SARS-CoV-2. What's exciting about that is we now have in our fingertips supercomputing, genomics, bioinformatics that wasn't as advanced even in 2003. And this is now allowing us to understand how contagious is this coronavirus. Because sadly, this mutation has allowed SARS-CoV-2 to become 1,000 times more infective than that of SARS. And that is the fear. The fear is SARS was an endemic, limited in its scale and scope, but now SARS-CoV-2 is a pandemic. How long will it take to develop a treatment or vaccine? First, let's even talk about what's the difference between a treatment versus a vaccine, because I think there's a lot of confusion around there. A vaccine is like that what you have for flu. We create a shot, a subcutaneous shot, and using a vector, sometimes a common cold vector, or what we call an adenovirus, in which we put the sequence of this SARS-CoV-2 into this to train and educate your body to recognize this virus and have readily available killer cells to prevent you getting infected. That's a vaccine. Unfortunately, that'll take a while to develop because testing needs to be done about the effectiveness of that vaccine in giving you true protection. On the other hand, we have patients that are ill, critically ill, mildly ill, that we can take a patient that is mildly ill and prevent her from becoming critically ill. We can take a patient that's critically ill from becoming severely to the point of fatally ill, and to understand how we can do that. I think treatment for these kinds of patients are much closer at hand. This virus works by hijacking a receptor in your body. It takes this receptor, uses the machinery of the lung, and actually replicates and infects the lung to the point of fibrosis and death. Worse, this virus has found a way to evade the immune system. It's found a way to actually kill the natural killer cells in your body, the T cells in your body. From the data again from China, what we've discovered is that the patients who die, not only are they elderly, but they have a low natural killer cell and T cell count. So we're beginning to understand this complex biology of this virus. And that's why I'm saying we're looking at it from a perspective not about the virus, but the host. So if we could understand the host's reaction and create counter reactions to this, we have a shot for treatment. So let me speak a little bit about treatment. There are multiple strategies. The first strategy is to take this concept that the virus has hijacked this receptor in our human body called the ACE. So this ACE receptor is the first port of entry. So if we could block the entry of this virus through this ACE receptor, we could block the entire cascade of its ability to use the engine and the machinery to regenerate. Well, happily and luckily, we now have scientists, and this is as recently as this month, understanding this ACE receptor through the power of genomics, through the power of supercomputing, through the power of protein folding. This complex receptor in our human body is now being able to understood. And because we can understand this receptor, we can find systems to create decoys and sponges so that this receptor cannot be attacked so that the virus can be, as a Trojan horse, blocked from entering, and is a very exciting strategy. The other strategy is to say, could we block the machinery? And the answer to that is yes, because we now understand how this virus replicates. The third strategy is, could we block what we call the endosomal packaging and block that? And what's exciting is we've now discovered potentially, and I say this potentially because science is not fully borne out, and this is an experience in China, that old drugs repurposed can actually block these packaging systems inside the cell of the human cell and ameliorate this disease. And a fourth strategy is to actually kill the factory of the virus itself. It turns out the way this virus works, it has found a way to kill the natural killer cells and T cells of the human body. From the results we've seen from China in the patients who had a fatal outcome in the elderly, the lymphocytes, or what we call the natural killer cells and T cells, are depleted, significantly depleted. Whether that's an effect of the virus or whether the patients are immunosuppressed or had pre-existing conditions, including cancer, it's not clear yet. But what is important and is clear is that these natural killer cells or T cells are depleted. However, we have in our innate system the ability to kill infected cells. So a very interesting strategy is to activate these natural killer cells that, as you could see from this diagram, has an ability to identify, lock onto, and really push what they call granzymes into these cells and destroy them. The way it will destroy them, it will actually completely almost dissolve the cell, and in so doing, we can then kill the factory itself. So the opportunity here now is not to affect the virus, but the factory of the virus and prevent its depletion. And in so doing, it may induce also a memory or a vaccine, and maybe even have a dual effect of reducing the infection, killing the infected cell, and allowing the patient's own immune system to get reactivated. These are the four opportunities that now face us as strategies for the scientific community to come together and work frantically towards. Number one, blocking the receptor, preventing it from entering. Number two, destroying the machinery, preventing it from replicating. Number three, preventing from repackaging and shedding. And number four, killing the factory itself. These are opportunities that gives us hope, and I hope will provide some level of comfort that the world working together will be able to find a way to stop this virus, stop this pandemic, and learn a lot about infectious diseases. We will be back on our special report of the science behind the coronavirus after this. The purpose of this presentation was not only to try and allay fears, but also to provide information that we as a community and as a nation can actually control. So I really feel it was important for me to speak about the science of soap, because we can not only control, we can prevent the spread. So let me speak about the science of soap. Viruses are not bacteria. So antibacterial soap is a myth as it relates to killing the viruses, because it has this fatty, greasy layer on its as an envelope, loves getting onto surfaces to which it will adhere, such as your hand. So your hand is a vector. But if you took this vector of the hand and understood the science of soap, where the virus has this fatty layer and the skin is the surface, detergent, straightforward regular detergent, dishwasher fluid, hair shampoo, detergent, soap, acts as a surfactant. What does that mean? It actually goes and orientates itself, these soap particles, towards the fatty layer of the virus. And in so doing, it actually orientates and lifts off these viruses and creates this clean surface. So we have the ability to understand that the science of soap, its natural ability to act as a detergent, the reason why you need at least 20 seconds, because your hands have nooks and crannies. You need the detergent to enter onto and create this interaction with the virus. You then need to rub and wash because you need it to be lifted from the surfaces. However, what's exciting about this virus is because it is an envelope virus. And that, by the way, is its Achilles heel. Because what does the soap do? The soap has an ability to crack that envelope. And if it cracks that envelope, you're able to kill that virus. So each one of us has the ability to be washing your hands and cracking that envelope and preventing the spread. This is the power and the science of soap. So with that, I'm sure we'll have questions on coronavirus, more questions on coronavirus. Please feel free to send us your questions. Email to coronavirus@latimes.com, and we'll try our best to answer them as we go through this understanding of the science behind coronavirus and try to not only allay fears, but put you in control of this disease.
Dr. Pat, I cannot thank you enough for joining me for this very important hour of information that we hope helps the readers of the LA Times, the viewers of Spectrum News 1 and LA Times Today. You had a very specific reason for wanting to produce this hour.
Well, what we wanted to do was accomplish peace of mind, positive action based on informed science to win this war against this coronavirus.
And to that end, it's all about information, right? Knowledge is power. We want to remind everybody that the Los Angeles Times has a mobile app that you can download. Just go to Google Play or Apple. And in addition, the LA Times has committed to producing a daily coronavirus newsletter, right, Dr. Pat?
Well, in this time of crisis and pandemic, we absolutely will be producing this daily newsletter, and we'll make it free to the public as a public service. I'm sure there'll be a huge amount of questions still, and so we'll have coronavirus@latimes.com in which you could send the questions.
And that concludes our 1 hour special on the science behind coronavirus. I'm Lisa McCree.
And I'm Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong.
And from all of us at LA Times Today, thank you for watching. Good night.